a young businessman saw this film of young businessmen rushing around, chasing each other in the way that he used to do at primary school, and I expect you did too, he said to me, "Don't think you're ever going to get me doing this." Well, I haven't tried yet, but it may be a thought that some of you are having looking at these pictures. And I quite understand it. At first, it doesn't seem a very attractive proposition to go back to being a child and running around, chasing one another, playing tag or odd man out, or making animal noises. But you know, playing these games, we learn something about ourselves that perhaps we've forgotten. We've forgotten what it's like to be part of a team, to be somebody who has a responsibility for somebody else to get them out of trouble when they've been touched, to release them by going through their legs when they've been caught, and also having a bit of fun running around didn't do any of us any harm. I could do with some more of it myself. But what we learn is that it's the team that matters, and within the team, we as individuals have enormous value. Value to each other, and we know that we can depend on other people to get us out of trouble. Sometimes we need reminding of this because we tend to forget it in the pressure cooker environment of the workplace. But it's not just that, is it? It's the fact that we build up around ourselves a lot of defences, and these defences very often stop us from getting through to the person we really want to get through to. And there's nothing like a bit of physical contact and a little bit of adrenaline and a bit of energy to begin to break that down. And I don't just mean energy, I also mean, well, humiliation, let's say. Because although it isn't humiliating to run around playing tag, it isn't perhaps what we think of ourselves as doing in our rather distinguished positions. Now this next exercise is very interesting because what each participant has to do is mirror what the other partner is doing. And at the beginning, obviously, somebody has to lead. But very soon, we hope to find a state where nobody is quite sure who is leading who anymore. We get a partnership. Now, very often what you see is, you see somebody who is very dominant, bullying, pushing the other partner around, making them do the most grotesque and outlandish movements with their hands. This isn't the game at all. The game is to try and find an equilibrium, an understanding, so that the movement is entirely harmonized. Now what very often happens is that there's the inner voice that says, you know, why are you doing this? What a stupid thing this is. How can you bully the other person? How can I take advantage of them? How can I dominate? But if you get people to breathe, if you remember to breathe yourself when you're doing it, and you focus on breathing, what you begin to discover is that you begin to get a harmony. You begin to get a harmony. And you're no longer conscious of who is leading, but what you are aware of is a great sense of togetherness. Now, of course, the way we breathe is very important, and becoming aware of the breathing pattern of your partner, having first of all become aware of your own breathing, which is not so easy to do sometimes, then we find that we become very close. And of course, if we're thinking about breathing, we neutralize the negative voice in our head, which is coming up with all these reasons to not succeed this interfering, negative, hopeless voice. Telling your life story and listening to somebody else tell their life story is not as easy as it seems, even if you've only got 2 minutes. Quite often, the storyteller will run out of words. Now, you might think nothing could be simpler than having 2 minutes to tell your entire life story. Something must come to mind, but very often people freeze. And this is quite interesting because the brain has to get into talking mode. It takes a little bit of time to warm up the brain. And in this exercise you also need to use a little bit of imagination, because telling your life story in 2 minutes, which is the task, obviously is impossible unless you have an extremely boring life, which most of us don't have. I often see people sitting completely frozen, wondering what to say next. In this exercise, you have to keep talking. There are no excuses. You have to force yourself through the barrier. Now, whilst you're doing that, your partner has to sit and listen to you. And again, it's quite interesting to see how difficult some people find listening. They will ask questions, they will interject, they might not even listen at all. And listening is another skill that we need, and it's a skill that if you're an actor, for example, or you're in a conference, you need to use quite a lot. You need to learn to listen. And unfortunately, we have so much sound and information and music being thrown at us all the time that in order to protect ourselves, we stop listening. A woman told me the other day that she has stopped listening to her husband when she goes home because in her open plan office, where there is so much noise, so many people talking, so much distraction, in order to focus on her work, she simply has to switch off. And when she goes home, she's forgotten how to do it. Or rather, she's forgotten how to switch on. So having got people to talk and listen to one another, we now move on to animal noises with a rhythm. So there's a pattern with a foot, a beaten rhythm, and each participant has to have an animal noise. So we create the farmyard sounds. Now, it's not as easy as it seems, because first of all people have to coordinate the rhythm of the beats. Then they have to do things which really are going through a barrier. They're having to make animal noises. Children wouldn't find it so difficult. Adults seem to find it quite a challenge.
Cocorico, cocorico, cocorico.
Cocorico, cocorico, cocorico.
Meow. Meow.
Ho, 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 ho.
Cocorico.
From that we go on to singing. Actually, speech and singing are very closely related, and yet in our societies we've sort of created a barrier between speech and singing, and yet if we elongate words we suddenly discover we are singing. So it's very close. What is singing after all? Elongated speech. Anyone can do it. Everyone can do it who has intonation in their voice. The voice that goes up and down, that has inflection, is singing. So when people say to me, I can't sing, it's usually because some teacher at school said, oh, you stop, you make a horrible noise, you stop it, you stop singing, you're spoiling the ensemble. And so that person thinks they can't sing. And yet they don't speak in a monotone, do they? Therefore, they must be aware of intonation. And it's simply a matter of coordination. Most people can do it. Even you, if you're doubting you can't. This is a game I particularly like. You take an object and you have to find lots of different uses for it. Now this is something that people really find difficult. Isn't it surprising? I can remember as a child sitting in a circle with something in the middle of the room, and we just had to get up and run over and show what it could be other than what it was. And here I gave them a camera stand, tripod. And I really established the fact that it was a tripod. And some people were able to turn it upside down and use it in lots of different ways. Other people found it quite difficult to break the idea that this was a tripod. Now, when we're discussing ideas, we have to be able to turn those ideas upside down in order to innovate, in order to find new approaches, new applications for that idea. If we stick to the same old thing, if we say, okay, it's a tripod, it can't be anything else, we're never going to be able to see other possibilities, are we? Of course, it may be best at being a tripod, but that doesn't mean it can't be something else. And what I've discovered, discussing things with people, is that somebody who comes up with the most absurd idea may be laughed at, but that absurd idea may spark in somebody else's imagination a thought that completely transforms the idea. So it's a very useful tool. And when people get stuck with how to resolve a problem, one of the best things to do is to just throw it all up in the air and see how it lands and look at it from other points of view. Make sense?